looking at instructional time and cost, technology, investment, and the time it's used for assessment. So we'll look at both as best we can compute actual costs like dollars, and also try to frame what lost opportunity there might be around students using time for testing versus other instructional activities. So it's not an exact science, but we think we can make sense of this. We'll bring it to you in probably a draft form once we have enough data in it that it makes sense. And then our goal is to have some of it available to you when you meet with the Boulder delegation, the legislators, in early December. If nothing more, at least a conversation point with them. And then let them know that we'll continue to refine that and update it. Some of what the data we will collect, we won't truly know the exact numbers until we administer the test in the spring. So we know we'll want to update it come June after we've administered all of the assessments to the grade levels come spring. So we'll build in what we think to be true and to be accurate, but until we actually administer the assessment, there's some data we won't have exact numbers on. I just wanted you to know I'm feeling good about that. I think we're making good progress, and a number of our team are working with Leslie on that. We're also reaching out to our peer districts in the Front Range, at least comparable size districts, to see how they're collecting this data, because we know that they are. We think there might be some value at least to have some common fields in this so we can have some comparative data that also might help us message to our elected officials as well as we proceed in this discussion. So that's an update on that. And then I just want to note we have an election in the state of Colorado on November 4th. You probably are aware of that. There are a couple races going on, but the one we're focusing on is 3A. So the Educational Facility Master Plan conversations continue. We continue to get really positive feedback from parent organizations, community organizations. Just got a note the other evening that I Have a Dream Board of Directors endorsed this, as have several other like organizations. So we're very hopeful that they are reflective of our community at large, and we've had some questions about issues related to the Facility Master Plan as well as the bond issue, and we've been able to respond to those quickly. We continue to update the questions and answers on our district website, so if you have questions, obviously direct them to us, and you might also, if patrons ask you questions, say, have you looked there first, because they might be able to answer their own question. But if they can't find it or don't think it's answered, then let us know, and we'll make sure that we answer their question, and generally that's what gives us new information to put on our website. We just then go ahead and put that question and answer up there. So anyway, again, we're feeling very optimistic, and we just need everybody to remember to get that mail-in ballot off their kitchen countertop and drop it off at the clerk's office or drop it in the U.S. mail. But I actually would suggest taking it now and delivering it, because we're close enough to the election date. So anyway, good news around that. We're very hopeful that a week from tonight we'll be enjoying the success of 3A's passage. Strategic planning update. We worked just last Friday. We have our co-chairs of the respective action design teams presented where they are with their big initiatives, with the proposing in the action design team. So it's sort of refining the work they've been doing for months. And so the audience for each of the co-chairs was the steering committee and the executive committee, and then we gave them feedback once again and asked questions of them. So it was a really constructive half day where we had a chance to see the overarching themes and also continue to refine. So we're on this march. We have scheduled on at least the advanced planning calendar, our December work session right now is dedicated to this work, and so there will be other information before that. But and we've talked informally about scheduling additional time if we think it's necessary. But that third Tuesday of December right now is earmarked for a work session around the strategic plan. So we're still feeling very optimistic and very appreciative of the fine work that our staff and leadership and community members are investing in the strategic plan. So good conversation on that last Friday with those involved. So I want to just remind you, on Monday, December 1st, we have scheduled a legislative breakfast with the Boulder delegation, and we're hopeful they'll all make their way here early in the morning to join us for breakfast and conversation. And so we can look forward to that. The other follow-up from a week ago, I believe, was that you asked that we would develop talking points and a timeline for activities around the student data privacy system. And so we, Andrew Moore and Melissa Barber are taking lead on putting that information together. We'll review it in Cabinet tomorrow, and then when it's ready, we'll be sharing that with you also. Those are a couple items you requested in part for your own planning, but also for the conversation with our legislative delegation as well. So that's another item you had asked for that we're working on right now. And then maybe in closing on my last topic, but I'd be glad to elaborate on any of these or other topics you're interested in, is that we are continuing, and we're getting closer to getting ready to make a recommendation on looking at consultants with regard to the board planning retreat. So Deirdre and I just finished a phone conversation with a consultant yesterday. We're going to bring this information forward to board leadership. Our hope is, plan is, next week when the agenda setting meeting occurs, and then we'll have conversation about how we best proceed. We've done reference checks on each of these consultants and have moved some out that don't seem to work for us right now, but I just want you to know we're making progress on that, and I'm thinking we're not right now opening any more doors. We're just reference checking those that we have on our table right now, and we think there's at least one in there that we can seriously consider to bring forward and get dates scheduled. And all of these folks, we have tentative dates that will work for them, so once we get closer to making a selection of the consultants we'll work with, then obviously we'll inventory your calendar and keep that moving. So I just wanted you to know we haven't lost track of that with all the other things going on. We're still working on that and feeling good about our options as we move forward. So, President Albright, that concludes my report. I'd be glad to answer any questions, members of the board.
Thank you. You covered a lot of territory there in that report. Thank you for your work. Board members, are there questions or comments? Tina. Yeah.
Just a quick question. Where is the CMAS data housed? How can people look it up at the school level?
So I think it's all online.
Is it CDE?
Yeah, so SchoolView, I think, is where they've loaded it up. I haven't. I mean, we have the data, but I think it's on SchoolView. So just where you would find the normal assessment data.
It wasn't up the other day, but I just want to know where.
It wasn't released until yesterday, so they wouldn't have posted it in advance. Okay. But if you have trouble finding it, just drop me an email. We'll make sure that they can find it there. So there will be parent reports eventually, but they've not. This is just the group data that's been released to date.
Can I just repeat what you just said? I think you just said CMAS data was just reported yesterday.
Released to the public yesterday, yes, the 27th. Yes, right. It was delayed a week because of some errors in the computation. It was supposed to be the 20th. They released it the 27th.
Thanks.
For the middle school and elementary students. And, of course, we're taking the high school one in November. So then that'll be released probably after the first of the year, I would guess.
I'd like to follow up with the CMAS question. Thank you for working on this report and with Leslie Stafford on your report about the testing, timing, and cost. Will that also include the CMAS test that the high school seniors are taking in November?
It will.
Because I think that's a interesting part of this
this will include all state-required assessments, so all levels. And we'll differentiate it as best we can by level. There's some overlap, like on technology, that's harder to do, but certainly where we can, we'll identify it by elementary, middle, and high school.
Okay. Good. Thanks. Shelley.
Are they reporting CMAS data by subgroup as well?
Yes.
And is that on the website?
I think so. So let us check, Shelley, make sure we obviously, until that went public, we didn't know for sure what they do. But yes, I would just say as we've looked at our own data around that, there are similar patterns that we would see in all the different data, both around special populations as well as poverty. So some pretty predictable patterns that we've seen in other assessment data. So I don't think I forwarded to you this morning. There was the Greeley Tribune editorial addressed this issue, and today, pretty well-written editorial, I would say, about the student assessments and probably some of the same cautions that I put in a note to you this morning about this, but also their observation was, once again, this follows the same economic lines of performance that we've seen in other state assessments, which is obviously continues to be a concern. So,
right. Well, you would expect that. I was just asking because, in the paper today, it's always problematic when they pull out a couple of schools.
Yes, it is.
Without identifying, some of the subgroup populations that might be involved. So I just hope that there's some way that we can get information out there in a more productive way that describes why some of our schools are performing the way they are. And So it would be nice if, I'm not sure how to do that. I don't really think many people are going to go to the CDE website to find that. So if there's something we could put out that would help people understand why certain schools do better than others in some cases, not that that's the only reason, but
it's highly predictive.
Yeah, I think it would be helpful. Also, when you're doing your assessment review, are you including TS Gold in that?
Yes, I think the TS Gold Readiness Assessment, Leslie, is included in that spreadsheet. Yeah. So, and it's, we start that administration next year, but we have enough information to at least anticipate. So we just need to be thoughtful that we say the present year would not include it, the following year would, but we certainly can quantify that as well.
Okay. And then I'm not quite sure how you're going to quantify the opportunity costs of something like that.
Yeah, I'm not either.
I mean, maybe the amount of time the teacher's doing that is amount of hours not being taught in that day. I'm not, because the TS Gold is so time intensive that,
very time intensive.
There needs to be some way for accounting what's being lost by teachers doing that.
So I would say, if I could, President Albright, I think that actually that part of the equation is actually probably easier for us to do. The harder part of the equation for us is the value it gives back to us. Mm-hmm. So if it takes 10 units of time to give an assessment and we really do gain information that's helpful to us, is it worth all 10 units or is it worth 5 units? And so it's the value added. If it has no value, well, then it's just a total 10-unit loss. But, I'd like to think, and the TS Gold is one that we think does have value. Now, the question is it, the return on investment? Is it, does it get there or not? I think that's probably the part of the equation that we may not know that for several years, to be honest. On some of these assessments, they'll be so new to us. It may take us several years to say, we can tease data out of that really does help inform instruction. We may not know that immediately, because we're getting, and they're refining it. But that's the other side of that equation of what it gives back to us. I mean, we're going to pay attention to it. It'll have a place in the chart. I just don't know that we're going to know that as accurately for a while. So, but I appreciate the question.
Right. That's a hard one. You have to make some assumptions about that. And then you have to make some assumptions about if you hadn't done TS Gold and you'd done something else, would you still be getting the same value? I mean, it's very complicated.
It's complicated.
So my other question has to do with the strategic plan.
Yes.
So we have a December work session about that, but you said that there might be information coming to us before that. And can you say more about?
Well, we're still doing some refining and packaging. We want how we bring it together and consolidate some of the efforts, and then how best to present that, because as it exists now, it's a lot of information, and they're still doing some refinement. So I don't know exactly, Shelley, what those precursors may look like, but certainly some of that we'll make available. We just don't know that today. I mean, we're still looking at, do we begin to consolidate some of this work into fewer plans, and what might that look like, and what are the metrics to measure that? That's really work we're doing right now with the executive committee and the steering committee. But, so it's the third week of October. I would say between now and Thanksgiving, we certainly will be able to better answer that question. There may be information we could share at that time in anticipation of the December work session. So, I mean, I think once we get it to that point, it'll be pretty understandable without great explanation, but we will want the opportunity in the work session to go through it together so we can add the explanation as well. So, so in that window somewhere, I just don't know today exactly when that'll be.
It just doesn't leave a lot of time for the board to review what's coming forward and then have input into the budget that actually makes sense in terms of the priorities. So I would encourage you to get it to us as soon as possible so that we can think about that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you.
Can I just add one thing to that? I also want to make sure we plan for the DAC feedback and process. So I echo the timeline concern.
Yeah. So we continue to have conversation with DAC leadership on this as well. Yeah, we know this will be a transition for DAC. It's already October, as they shared with you. And I think we have a DAC District Accountability Committee work session on your calendar for November 18th, I think, if that's the right day of the month. We have a 5 to 6 o'clock time, I think, scheduled. So I anticipate this will be a part of that conversation, not so much the specifics of the plans, but how do they work in partnership with the district board and staff on that.
Jenny.
So, Shelley, I'd like to build on something you said, because I thought it was a good comment about getting our story out to the public. And Bruce, you had some comments in a letter to us today that I think, and together with what you've talked about, the difficulties of, the predictive nature of the results given the different populations we have, I think it might make a blog or an op-ed or a letter to the editor or something. And I also, it occurred to me as some of the, when I read your letter, that perhaps, I mean, a lot of the newspaper coverage tends to assume that the problems with the test results are problems with the education. I mean, they're trying not to do that totally, but that seems to be the assumption rather than actual problems with the test.
Right. And
I think we don't know that yet. But I do have a question about that, which is because I found the coverage a little unsatisfying, just having enough. Are we going to get, or are teachers going to get information about which items kids, or what kinds of items students were most likely to do well or poorly on?
Yeah, so we'll get item analysis from the test like we do any assessment. I think the big work for us internally is to be clear on, were these items to test this standard in science education, and is that helpful feedback to us, or does it assess it in a way that's accurate and meaningful? I mean, I just have to say we don't know the answer to that question, and I would argue others don't know they might say they know the answer to that. I mean, it's by design it's supposed to do that, but to check the validity of a test, it takes time, and both base validity, does it provide the information, and we just have to keep in mind these are gross state accountability measures. These aren't formative assessments, and so whatever formative assessments we're using in classroom, in courses, we need to put that up against this and say, from our assessment, the students do know this. Do they know this over here on this item analysis? But, our curriculum directors under Dr. Cabrera's leadership, that's work we'll begin to do. But, this is the first time we've seen the data, so it will take some time. And they're doing that same analysis at the state level. One of the questions I asked a month ago is how exactly are we setting what proficiency is? Who's advising that work? Based on what data? That was in my note to you today. I think those are real big questions that have to be answered, and I did receive an answer back. I won't tell you I was totally satisfied with the response, but I did get a response back from the Colorado Department of Education. But that's just work, I wouldn't say that it was perfect in the old assessment, but we just got used to it. But when you have a new assessment, there are some critical questions that really need to be addressed on the front end on the first few years of administration to make sure they're appropriately addressed. And so we'll continue to work with the Colorado Department of Education on that.
And then I hope we'll be really clear with our schools about what we expect, how we expect them to treat this data, yes. Because I feel like last year perhaps we said that math TCAP scores weren't going to be held against schools, but I feel like things I'm hearing from parents were that the TCAP test did affect programming for some kids.
Yeah.
And
some transition pains. You're right.
So I hope we're really clear in communicating to schools how we intend them to react to this information on a school level basis.
So we had a K-12 principals meeting this morning. All of our principals, assistant principals met with leadership of the district. It was our monthly meeting. We're doing some training on educator effectiveness and some good training. And then also each of the levels, elementary, middle, and high, met today. And each of those three levels talked about student assessment, as you can imagine. So we're having a lot of good internal conversations. And we meet again in the next month a couple of times with our leadership. And we've included teacher leadership in these discussions. We really are planning a pretty aggressive communication strategy around this after the first of the year, so get through winter break, and so that I think some of what we found in the assessments already administered and what we anticipate coming up, so that students and parents are informed. We don't want so far in advance it's meaningless, but I think there's an increased heightened awareness now that this wave of assessment is coming, and I think it'll be a big topic of conversation in this legislature. So it'll be in the media some, I believe. So I think as accompanying a communication plan with that, we hope will be very informative and helpful. And I think some of the issues, Shelley, you raised about, anticipated patterns or trends and inform the balanced piece of that would be a part of that communication strategy.
Thank you.
I'll just third or fourth that. I think it's. I had some issues with the coverage as well. I think it concerns me when people draw overbroad conclusions from a limited amount of facts, and reporters do the best jobs they can with time and space constraints, but I really appreciate that everybody at this table wants to caution the folks in the community to not, jump to any conclusions like best test score equals best school or anything simplistic like that. So wanted to echo everybody else's comments there.
I would say from my perspective on this testing, it's that when you look to see where our students go when they graduate and whether they really, in fact, are college and career ready, they are. So it's real interesting when you have a test at 4th grade or 7th grade level that says they're not, and yet the proof is, at least looking backwards, perhaps not looking forwards to this particular cohort of students, but as you look forward or look back to what our students have done in the past, they're doing fine. So it's just, it's the same caution about the test, the validity and the reliability of what they're really testing and what we're really discovering, and more importantly, how it's being used to help our young people who need help. Okay, any other comments? Okay, thank you, Dr. Messenger, for your report. You guys are working hard. That's a lot of stuff going on. Thank you. The next item is public participation, and we have no one here today to speak. The next item on our agenda is board communication. So board members, we've already had a little bit of chance to weigh in on some of the important issues we're talking about, but does anybody have anything else? Shelley, Tina? No? No. Sam?
Yeah, really quick.
Sure.
I was at the Colorado Association of Libraries conference the other weekend, a state library conference, and a lot of great partnerships between our public library systems and our public schools, including a contingent from the Boulder Library, and very happy to see the connections that are being strengthened by David Farnan, the director of the Boulder Libraries, and Dr. Messenger and our team here. That's just terrific. Also, the state librarians gave their Intellectual Freedom Award to the Jeffco Student Network for Change for the kids who are standing up for their freedom to learn and learning civil disobedience by doing it. So that was, I thought, a nice bit of recognition that our state librarians gave to the students in Jeffco. Also, I'm just so impressed with the work everybody's doing on 3A, and I want to thank everybody at this table and anybody else listening for their hard work and support of the bond issue. I voted for it and turned in my ballot and have been talking to my neighbors and colleagues about it. And I think people get that it's both an investment for the next few years and a long-term investment in our kids. So feeling optimistic and just saying thanks to everybody for their hard work on it.
Thank you, Sam. Jenny?
So I'm just going to comment. Shelley and I attended a half-day meeting of the Educator Effectiveness Subcommittee, and I think I sent out notes to everybody. I hope they got them. Did people get them? Actually, no. I was afraid of that, so I'll resend. So, but it was a constructive meeting. We're starting to get feedback from schools on how things went last year, and I think the feedback is mostly positive. And where there are criticisms, they're more around technology than around the substance of the evaluation. And there seems to be the buy-in is really good, and the people on that committee are the teachers and educators on that committee are really terrific. And I'm trying to remember what else. Maybe you can help me, Shelley. So work is going forward. Mary Jo and Shelley did a lot of trainings this year, and we'll continue to do more trainings to get. And we're sort of working on inter-rater reliability. I think is a big deal, so that everybody who looks at a particular piece of classroom work or whatever would agree that would rate a teacher the same way, or a principal the same way for that matter.
Big deal.
So and we're also working. We've had committees meet or they had a committee meet to do the special. Help me. What are they called? Professionals. I wanted to call them something else. The service professionals, like the OTs and the psychologists and the social workers and the counselors, worked on their rubrics and sort of modified the state rubrics to reflect Boulder Valley values. Am I forgetting anything, Shelley, that you think was important?
I just would say there's been an impressive amount of work that's gone on since the last meeting I attended. And the next step are the subcommittees. Did you mention that are spinning off now? There's 5 of those, right, Shelley, subcommittees that are going to be continuing the work. So I plan on being on at least one of them. So,
yeah. So I will find my notes and send them out again. I'm sorry they didn't. I was afraid they didn't get delivered. I got some weird little note from my from our service person. So anyway, I will send them out again. I'm sorry you didn't get them. I'd just like to mention. I'd like to thank the schools in Broomfield. The Fish Food Pantry, which is the large food pantry that serves a number of our the Broomfield community, and so a number of the Broomfield students in our Broomfield schools and families had their big fundraising luncheon last Friday. And Boulder Valley Schools, the principals put together 4 tables representing Boulder Valley schools, and neighboring districts that also have schools in Broomfield didn't have any tables. And I think that the presence at that luncheon is a big deal. There were 500 people there, and they knew that Boulder Valley was there. And they knew that Boulder Valley was supportive of their efforts, and we are, because they feed our kids. And so I think that it was a small thing for the principals to do and to show up at, and it was paid off in good relations with our community. So I'd just like to give a shout out to the Broomfield folks who were there. I was really proud to sit at one of those tables myself.
Cool.
And then I got to judge some of the homecoming Spirit Week at Broomfield High School this year. I was part of their panel of judges, which was a lot of fun. I saw a couple of teachers a teacher that had been one of my daughter's teachers, and a teacher that I'd worked with at Aspen Creek, and so it was great fun, and just a lot of. It was good to see all that school spirit at Broomfield this last week. So I hope Student Council will invite me back next year.
But they will.
Shelley?
Tom and I met with the DAC Exec Committee to discuss their priorities for the coming year. And I just want to remind you that they're awaiting the board's thoughts and guidance on that. We discussed it a little bit at the last meeting. And so I don't know if we want to talk about that as a group now. I don't think probably people are prepared. But if you want to send me any questions you might have or anything that you might want them working on, then I can collate all that and send it back to the board, and we can prioritize. And if I don't get any input, we can just move ahead with what we've already told them, which is basically we want their input on the strategic plan. We're going to want their input on the privacy policy. And I think that was essentially it for now. So if you have anything else, please let me know. And I'd also like to congratulate the St. Vrain Valley School District for the huge international award they just received for their parent participation process. And I know that they are sharing that process with other districts, and I'm wondering if maybe this board might be interested in knowing what they've done. And they actually had to go to some other country to receive their award. It was an international award, and it was quite a big deal. So are you? Is anyone interested in knowing what they're doing? No.
I'm interested, and here's what I would suggest. How about if we suggest that we talk about this at our next agenda setting meeting, and see if we can get a spot for an information item.
Great.
On it. I've been really impressed with that program. I've watched it over the years develop, and I think it's terrific. And I think anytime you can engage the public in learning more about what we do, because it's not that it's so hard, but schools are pretty complex, and it just helps to have a program where people can learn. So something I'd love to look into. So both to learn about it and to think about perhaps even doing it here. So is there anything else, Shelley? No? Okay. Well, I've been watching the campaign develop. It's really been interesting, from doing this extensive assessment of our buildings and facilities that we did a couple of years ago, and then last spring having the recommendation from the SIPC and from the superintendent and his staff to bring this idea forward, and the board mulled it over for the summer and thought about it and came forward finally with the facilities master plan. And we voted to put it on the ballot in August, and here we are with 6 days left to go, or 7, I don't know. Next Tuesday night at 7 o'clock we'll know. So my fingers are crossed that this will pass and that we will be able to provide the kind of facilities that this board has wanted to provide for our students and our educators and our community, both for education reasons and for economic reasons in our community. So I'm curious about how this will turn out. I think it's been notable the number of community groups that have stepped forward to support this, and we have support in the community from groups as well as from individuals. And I think it's also really important to especially note that Impact on Education, the Foundation for Boulder Valley Schools, has been so careful about how to explain to people about what's going on, and they've done an extraordinary job. And I appreciate all the work of our community members. So it's important to vote and get our ballots in. It's a big election on a lot of counts. Oh, and the other thing for fun. Last week I went to Fairview's annual extravaganza where about, 1,000 young people were out doing music and art and theater and jazz and orchestra, and it was just an extraordinary evening. And I continue to marvel at our fine arts program in our district, but especially the one at Fairview. And I also note that the Fairview Marching Knights took third place at their state competition over the weekend. So, music continues to be real strong in our district, which I'm especially proud of. So, any other board member comments? Okay. Then the next item on our agenda is our informational item. And Dr. Messenger, we are talking about consensus and shared decision-making update as an information item. And I believe you're going to start together with Dr. Pilch to give us an update on where we are. And as you're making your way to the podium, this is not just the superintendent's report. It's an information item. So thank you very much. Thank you.
President Albright, members of the board, Dr. Pilch and I are pleased this evening to provide you an update on your request of our work around consensus and shared decision-making. So as an introduction, this has been a multi-year effort that you personally have been involved in, as well as many members of our faculty and our community. And so we want to give you an overview as to where it is. So consensus development is a process that we've worked on, and also we are applying it to our work around shared decision-making in the district, throughout the district. So that's what we'll describe to you this evening. Just to reflect back, it was in 2012 when I came to the district, 11-12, where we had conversation about how we might enter into contract negotiations and bargaining in a way that might result in greater success than in the past that we had in this district. And so I brought to you, along with leadership of the Teachers Association and our administration, the idea that we might train and work through a consensus process to work in collaboration with our teacher leadership. And so we did that for a lot of days that winter and spring. And you participated in that. And not only did we acquire skills in that process about how to facilitate and participate in consensus work, we also applied it to the contract, and we had great success. And we developed a 3-year contract, which we are in the 3rd year of that. When we talked about that in the fall of 2011, what I assured you is that we would get a contract either way. I was confident of that. But if we use this process, we would change the district. And what Deirdre and I are going to share with you tonight is we believe that is what has happened as a result of now hundreds of individuals involved. So it was that early work we did around the contract. You recall, because you were involved, that we used this same process under the facilitation of Bob Chadwick and Diane Seahaver to work on ultimately what you approved in June of 2013, a new vision, mission, and goals for our school district, of which now is driving our work on our strategic plan. You personally participated, along with administration, teachers, and community members, through several months of many meetings, developing ultimately value statements which we receive community engagement on to lead to our vision, mission, and goals. So we are living the benefit of that in many ways right now. Some of the other output of that is that part of our work in bargaining was that we would create a labor management team, meaning that monthly, several members of my cabinet meet with leadership of the Teachers Association to problem solve issues so that some of those we just work out along the way and we don't have to bring them to bargaining. Others we'll bring to bargaining when we more formally open that up. So that's been a huge benefit, has really facilitated constructive, thoughtful communication among the leadership of the Teachers Association, and we've expanded that to our other employee groups as well. So creating that sense of unity and collaboration and positive work together has been a huge benefit of our work around consensus and shared decision making. Within the superintendent's cabinet, those who report directly to Deirdre or myself, we meet weekly, and over a year ago, we invited the president of the Teachers Association to join us. So Tina Mew meets weekly with our cabinet as a member of our cabinet, and she represents the other employee groups, and there are times once a month we check back with those other employee groups to make sure that her voice is representing them in those cabinet-level discussions. Much of that work ultimately winds up in the boardroom. And as we anticipate our work going into the next contract negotiations, we will, with your support already, we will use this process going forward. And just recently, you participated in community engagement sessions around the development of the facility master plan, and we did just this process where we invited multiple community engagement sessions in March of last year and received a lot of input. So we're living this day to day. And so I'd like to invite Dr. Puff to come to the podium and provide you some additional detail about the training we're doing. Deirdre?
Thank you, Dr. Messenger. Good evening. So the training is typically a 3-day training, and with about 60 to 80 participants in each of the trainings. We've conducted 3 of those trainings here in the district and are preparing for 2 more of those trainings this year. At a training, a team will come from a building or a department made up of about 5 to 8 team members. And they will be trained, and then they take that work back to their building or their department after that training. The first 2 days of the training are typically working on the theory behind collaboration and shared decision-making and problem-solving. And then on the 3rd day, the participants are brought back together with their team from their building or their department, and they begin to work on a plan for the work they will do going forward after they leave the training. Our consultants call this a practicum that they take back to the building or back to their department to work on, so they can practice the skills and the strategies and get some work on that before they are brought back again for some refreshment on that work. At the end of the 3 days, when folks go back to their buildings or to their department, we know that they sometimes need additional support. So we have been developing a cadre of BVSD staff, which I'll talk about a little bit more before we conclude, who can support those buildings or departments in this work. We have about 250 people already trained, and like I said, there'll be 2 more trainings. Over the next year and a half, we will have trained every department, some members from each department in the district, and some staff members from every building in the district. As we bring on a new principal in the district, we bring that principal into the training with a team. Even if a team from that building has already been trained, they come back, and so they initiate that work as a new principal with their staff. So we believe that we're really creating a culture in BVSD, and Dr. Messenger referenced that, about the way that we work and the way that we work to make sure that all voices are heard from within a community. It also ties closely to educator effectiveness, both in our teacher standards as well as in our principal standards. Specifically, there's an expectation in both group standards that shared decision-making is used to foster an inclusive environment for all members of a school community. So we intend to continue to monitor this work as we continue to roll out educator effectiveness standards. Dr. Messenger mentioned this culture that we've been creating over the last 3 years of really hearing all voices and ensuring shared decision-making, and we're very committed to that. We've been using these strategies and skills with our district leadership team. Every month when we bring our 150-member district leadership team together, we typically use some of these skills or strategies with them to reinforce and to model for them the importance of shared decision-making. Just today, with our K-12 principals, we use some of these strategies with with them. Our cabinet, Bruce mentioned the cabinet and our instructional leadership team, but we did a cabinet retreat this summer. We used these skills throughout that retreat so that we're reinforcing working in this way with all of our district leaders. And then finally, of course, with our strategic planning steering committee and our action design teams, we have used these strategies and skills as well. We did a mini training for each of the co-chairs for the action design teams so they would be prepared to lead in an inclusive and collaborative way and build consensus on their action design teams. So I mentioned that we're building a cadre of staff who we're training to support buildings as they go back. We have staff and former staff, some retired staff as well, who we have identified, who have volunteered and agreed to receive more intensive training around this. And we will conduct an additional training in December for those staff and former staff so that after this year, BVSD staff and former staff will take these trainings. We will not need to continue to bring in the facilitator from outside to lead these trainings. So we're excited about that sustainability that we've created, and we're excited about the individuals who have stepped up and said, hey, I'd really like to be a part of leading this work in the district. And we know that there's times that departments or buildings get kind of stuck and they need some help, and we want to have a team of folks in the district who we know that we can deploy one or two of those individuals when we need to help a building or a department move forward. I want to invite Bruce back up. We want to talk about how we're going to evaluate this, and then we'll close out for you. We know that what we hear back on the TEL survey will tell us whether and how well we're doing on our shared decision making. We know that our staff and parent snapshot surveys give us some of that data. And then finally, as I referenced earlier, our educator effectiveness work will also help to inform us of the effectiveness of the implementation of this work.
So I would just say in closing, we see this as pretty transformational for our district. We are moving and working in a different place than we were just a few years ago. And we think there are examples of many benefits for all of our employees as well as our community. And many of our community have been participating in this. In the first year I was here, members of the teacher leadership came forward to me and said, so do you think we could ever do this shared decision-making thing? It's been in our contract since the early 90s. And I looked at the language and I said, well, I don't think it's dated. I think it's still really good language. We should do that. And so we are doing that now. And we were just meeting, Deirdre and I, in our weekly meeting with President of the Boulder Valley Education Association, Tina Mew, and visiting with her today. And she said, people aren't asking that question anymore. Now they're asking us, how do we get better at it and how do we improve our skills at it? But we're not anymore asking the question, how do we do what we committed ourselves to do 2 decades ago? We are doing it now. So anyway, I hope you feel the same. We certainly in leadership roles feel like this has had great benefit to our school district and our school community. And Deirdre and I stand prepared to answer any questions that you might have.
I'll just add that board member Tina Marquis will participate in the training this next week that we plan to do.
Thanks, Tina. So, Lori, questions for the board?
Great. Tina will have a good time, as we all know, those of us who've been through this. Thank you for your presentation and information about this. Board members, are there questions or comments?
I would love to hear a couple examples that I may not be aware of how this process and its implementation has changed individual schools, departments. Can you hit us with a couple of those?
Sure. You want to start, Deirdre? I'm thinking maybe just some of the work on the vision and mission that you heard about today.
So just today we were working with principals and assistant principals on the development of mission and vision at the building site. And so a couple of the principals in our group, in each of our groups who had already been through this training, talked about how they have been using this to get to a new vision and mission in their building. And they've talked about some of the struggles they've had and needing some help from some of their colleagues. But they're using the process to get to their consensus. One of the things that comes out of this, you guys remember the collective statements, and Tina, you'll know about this next week. But they were referencing the collective statements they now have in moving toward getting to a vision for their building. So that's pretty exciting. What we have found is that when schools are bumping up against a difficult issue, much like we were during the negotiations process, that this is a way for them to navigate that difficult issue. And sometimes in the past, we just didn't have a way to navigate those issues, and so we didn't address them, or sometimes we addressed them in a not very productive way.
So beyond the schoolhouse, another example I would share is Director of Food Service Ann Cooper and all of the employees she works with, wanted to address some labor issues and some, areas of concern within the workforce there, like we deal with a lot all the time. And so retired principal, Allison Boggs, who has taken a liking to this work and is quite skilled, has worked alongside Ann to facilitate conversations within one of our support operations as well. So it's not just in the schoolhouse that this is having positive impact. We see it in our other employee groups as well as we move forward. So those would be a couple examples, Sam, that we're doing right now.
I would be remiss not to mention Boulder High School. So this, as you all know, we had placed an interim principal at Boulder High School for this year. So as they kicked off their school year, Allison Boggs and Dan Lawler, another retired principal who we work with Terry Galatch, the interim principal there, and several staff, and they actually used this process to get to some shared agreements as they start the school year and as they prepare for a new principal coming next year.
So those of you that have been in the circle have done this. So when Deirdre and I welcomed them that morning, this was all of the faculty of Boulder High, a circle that filled the gymnasium at Boulder High. So it was a large group that was facilitated through the course of that day. It was a productive day.
My ongoing gratitude and respect to both of you for bringing this and encouraging it. It's terrific. Thank you.
Shelley. Well, I've seen personally how well this has worked in many very potentially problematic situations. So I really appreciate the work that you brought into the district with Bob and Diane and everything that they've accomplished and we've accomplished. But I also know that this is not without a cost. And so I'm wondering if what our ongoing plans are for supporting this and where that fits in the budget. And have we hired Allison and Dan on a permanent basis to do this, or exactly how is that going to look?
So one of the parts of Deirdre's comments were about the sustainability. So I'll just go back in there. So yes, there has been cost associated with our contract with external facilitators that have been very helpful to us. Long range, we believe that building the sustainability and the capacity of this is to have our own employees be able to do this. So peer-to-peer, my work in the previous district, that over the course of years, that you really have folks alongside you who can do this. Now, there's still cost with that, because if I'm walking away from my primary job to go facilitate in a building for the day or a department, then that's work that I need to come back to. So we are employing some of our retired folks on a part-time basis, temporary part-time, so not ongoing permanent employment, to assist us with that. But we do have it planned into the budget as a part of our ongoing work. But we anticipate our capacity will increase notably when we train internally, and we really believe that will be at the same time the cost goes down, because we're not dependent to bring consultants into our community, and plus there are just some logistics planning around that are sometimes challenging when we have to compress everything into a week, because that's when they're here, and clearly we've benefited greatly from them. But we will build this into part of our ongoing cost, but we do see some reduction in that as we have our trainer of trainers model completed.
So when everyone's adequately trained, then you would expect that these part-time employees that we're having do this would go away, or they would still be there to support?
Yeah, go ahead and then maybe talk about Mary Jo's work as well.
So, I think the reality is we will always need some of this support, because we will always be bringing new leaders into the system and new staff into the system. So we will always need some additional support for this. We also know that we can't be pulling classroom teachers who might be facilitators or principals who might be facilitators from their buildings multiple times throughout the year. And so we probably will rely on some of our retired folks on an ongoing basis. We also, with our new director of professional development, professional learning, Mary Jo Bode, will also take a leadership role in this work, and so she'll be able to pick up a big bulk of it. And if you think of her as a 1.0, and then these other little pieces around, like Dan Lawler and Allison Boggs, our budgets can sustain this. We really, we pulled from the secondary and the elementary school leadership budgets and the superintendent's budget over 2 years ago to begin this work, and we just made it our priority. And we always have done and always will do work for schools that costs us something. And this has been the work that we have done for schools on a system-wide basis, and with it does come a cost.
Jenny?
So I appreciate this work being introduced into our community, because I do think that you're absolutely right. We've never really done good consensus work in our buildings, and we used to hear about it. As board members, we would hear about why this wasn't happening, and I haven't heard that particularly in a while. I have heard that it's very hard work, and, my building is bad. It took us forever to get our shared, but I think that's just the way that goes. That's hard work, and I'm glad to see people engaging in that hard work. My question has to do with who we. Well, first of all, could you repeat the part about educator effectiveness? I didn't quite catch how that fits in. I've got 2 questions.
Sure, Jenny. It's actually a standard in educator effectiveness for teachers and principals both, for shared decision making and creating a shared vision of the school. And one of the specific indicators is that there's an expectation that shared decision making is used to foster inclusive environment for all members of a school community. And as we look at the criteria, even in a principal evaluation, when a principal is doing everything they can, the staff are actually leading this work rather than the principal leading the work. So it has a big impact on educator effectiveness for principals and teachers both.
Okay, thank you. I just didn't quite catch that. I guess I should have known it from my work on the Educator Effectiveness Committee, but somehow. So my question has to do with shared decision making or the consensus process within the larger community. So many decisions that schools make don't necessarily need to involve, can just be the staff and the principals, but sometimes there are decisions that should involve maybe the larger community, which would be parents and students, and maybe even beyond that. And I'm wondering if we have if any of that work is going on, or do we have a plan for that at our school level?
So you're right, Jenny. I think that that's, as we become mature with this process and become more sophisticated, I think we will find ways that it's appropriate, and you've participated in some of those yourselves as we've reached out to the community. And I think for us right now, probably it's first things first, where we start the training and have some early success within the internal school community initially, but absolutely as we consider initiatives or work at the school level or the district level, to have that be inclusive of many more is appropriate. And I think, obviously we need to gain the skills and the confidence to be able to do that. We've practiced some of that at the district level, and you've participated in some of that. And we've relied on external facilitators for some of that. And so our hope is that over time we're less dependent on external facilitators, and that it's more than just at the district level, that it really is at the school level. And I think there are examples of that has started already. Sometimes we talk about decisions that are made at a school level that are administrative in nature, and by law that's the principal's decision. Then there are those that are administrative decisions with input from others. Then there are those that are truly shared, that a principal's voice or a teacher leader's voice is one just like everyone else. And so some of our development over time is to be smart about which of those decisions fit where, and sometimes we do a lot of shared because everybody wants their voice in. Then over time they gain confidence in the administration, so they say, just let us give input, and you can take it from there. So those are conversations that go on all the time in schools. And what we've lacked at times are the skill sets to actually facilitate those conversations. And I think that's acquiring the skills and the confidence to do that. So, we absolutely are interested in, and again, it's very consistent with the educator effectiveness. It's also very consistent with the vision, mission, and goals that you approved a year ago last June. It talks about that broad, inclusive environment to keep community with us. One of our action design teams, one category is called partnerships, where it's around reaching out to our community, and so proposals will come forward to that, which will absolutely, the parent engagement will be one of those where we reach out and get more people involved.
I hope so. I think this is a good skill to take out into our larger community and to ensure that they become involved. And students, it would be great for students too.
Absolutely. So. That came up today.
Deirdre, you mentioned that we would have some feedback in the form of the parent-student snapshot and the TEL survey. Could you talk briefly about, one, the TEL survey, what that is, and secondly, could you, I'm just curious about other ways that you might, what other ways that you're collecting feedback? I mean, what are people saying after they get out there for 3 months, 6 months, a year?
So I'm going to start at the end of that question. So I think one of the most telling things to us around if a school is really doing this work is when we walk in for a staff meeting and the staff is sitting in a circle. And that's going on in many of our schools. And what we see is, as you know, through what you did through the negotiations process, is you wouldn't necessarily know who the principal is in that circle if you didn't know who he or she was, because all voices are even. And so I think that is really telling. And then when the principals hold us accountable and say, hey, where's the shared decision making in this, when they ask us that question, we know that they've bought in and they're paying attention to what we're doing. The TEL survey, you might remember, is administered at the state level. So it's a statewide survey that teachers can respond to. Data comes back building by building throughout the state of Colorado. It's administered every other year in the spring, so we didn't administer it last spring, but we will administer it this spring. It's divided into sections, and specifically there's a section on school leadership and a section on governance. And so in both of those areas, it's pretty clear for us when we look at that data, and a principal, when he or she looks at that data from her staff, on how they're being perceived around shared decision making and around collaboration. The parent snapshot survey also asks some specific questions around, I have an opportunity to have input into decisions at my school, and I'm aware of decisions at my school. So those are pieces that we'll watch. And I think the biggest tell for us is we don't have grievances coming forward from our buildings. We just don't, because schools are solving their problems, and that's a huge indicator of success around shared decision making, when schools are able to make difficult decisions around staffing, around their master schedule, and they're able to do that in their building. And those kinds of decisions are not made well from the top down. They really do take a collaboration and a shared decision making approach to get to a suitable resolution for everyone involved in it. Is there anything you want to add?
I would just, so some of us have been in this work for a while, and, this isn't necessarily the leadership or management model that folks have been trained in over time. So It is hard work, and we are asking people to move significantly in how they lead and how they get other voice in that. And so we understand that the change process is really important, and so we are being patient with that and supportive of that. So we have expectations around it, and we want to provide the level of support that we just discussed earlier, because we are in some cases asking people to get way out of their comfort zone, not just the principals, but others as well. And sometimes when parents are invited in to participate, that's maybe a little foreign to them as well. So that's a transition also. So we appreciate this as a continuum of work over time. And, I guess we're still at the beginning of this journey, but we feel good about the progress we've made.
So maybe those parents who got involved when they were parents of elementary school kids, by the time they get to high school, They'll be whizzes at it and be able to, Well, for me, it'll be interesting to feel the cultural change and the climate change in schools, and to see that it feels different, and that people are more engaged. And I think that's key with this work, and I'm real grateful for it. Thank you from me. Yeah, sure.
I just realized we're having this discussion during October, which is Conflict Resolution Month in Colorado, and we are modeling that.
Planned it that way.
You did. Well, and there's wonderful resources online for anybody who wants to learn more about that. So we're doing it, we're modeling it here in our district, and thank you again.
Okay, thanks. Yeah. Are you okay? Anyone else? Thank you very much for this presentation, the update, the numbers, the way you've rolled it out and planned it, and the evaluation and feedback. So thank you very much. And I don't know if we have to do it again sometime. We'll see.
Soon. So I would just note for the viewing audience and those that catch us on video later that there's a report that accompanied this board agenda item. So in the board docs library is a report that Deirdre and I compiled that kind of gives a recap of what we just shared this evening. So if folks are interested in accessing that, it's available online. And Deirdre and I are serving as spokesperson tonight on this issue. There are many, many who could do this, and Tina Mew would have accompanied us in this presentation this evening, but she was in another commitment. So we both want to acknowledge the progressive, supportive leadership you have provided us. Not every Board of Education or community would support this kind of work, and you have, and we are very appreciative of that because this is consistent with our desire to lead in this way, but we know we couldn't do that without your support. So we'd like to thank you for that. Thanks.
Thank you. Great. Okay. The next item on our agenda this evening is consent grouping, and I will read them. Personnel items, approval of minutes October 14th, 2014 regular meeting, approval of minutes October 21st, 2014 special meeting, acceptance of donation from Boulder High School, acceptance of donation from Douglas Elementary, acceptance of donation from Lafayette Elementary School, approval of memorandum of understanding between BVSD and the Boulder County Impact Partnership. Do I have a motion to approve? Sam is second. Jenny? Thank you. Board members, are there any items that you would like pulled? No? Are there any items that anyone has a question on?
I do.
Great. Jenny?
Okay, so, and this is, if you don't know it, it's fine, but I noticed that the class of 1967 and Dr. James Gonzalez are giving Boulder High School $20,000, and there's a bronze plaque describing the history of Minnie and Jake. What is the history of Minnie and Jake? What does that mean? Thank you,
Briggs.
Briggs Gamblin.
Director, go ahead.
Briggs Gamblin, Director of Communication and Legislative Affairs, coming to the podium for a history lesson.
Occasionally trivia. They are the two stylized people up in the front of the on the front of the building, right by the main entrance, and they were somewhat controversial when they were first put up there when the building was built in 1937, and there is a rich history to it that you can read about. But they were named Minnie and Jake, and it's old Boulder High School folklore. Okay. They represent strength and wisdom. That's right, strength and wisdom. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Don.
Thank you for that explanation.
Thanks for asking.
I'm so impressed. By the way, I have to say I'm so impressed that the class of 1967 has come back and is making a big donation to Boulder High. I think that's just awesome.
Any other comments or questions? Sandy, will you please call for the vote?
Albright?
Yes.
Belville?
Yes.
Benford?
Yes.
Fuqua?
Yes.
Marquis?
Yes.
Motion passes.
Okay, the next item on our agenda is agenda setting. Does anyone have any items that they'd like to discuss? I think, let's see, one thing we're going to be talking about soon is the DAC meeting. Shelley, you were talking about that, about feedback to give to DAC about what the board might want them to work on. When is that meeting coming up? Sandy, I asked you about it.
It's Tuesday, November 18th.
Right.
It's a work
November
session.
18th, right, at 5 o'clock. So in our next board meeting, we're going to talk about that with the DAC Exec Committee. So that would be a good time to have a discussion and be more clear and unified about what the board is thinking about. So we'll be glad to meet with them at that time. Well, it's a meeting with the Executive Committee. It's the...
Are you talking about the work session, or are you
Yes.
talking about... Okay.
Right.
Yeah.
I'm talking about the next work session.
Okay.
To talk about where we are and what we're doing
Right.
going forward, I think.
Right.
So.
The issue's been that work session is taking place a little later in the year than it typically does, so
Right.
the year's getting away from us. So.
Right. Luckily, it's only 19 days away, or 20.
So does that mean there won't be any input coming forth before that from the board, so I can just tell them that?
Well, if we're to speak as a board about, what the board wants them to do rather than what individuals, yeah, I think so.
Well, but that's fine. I mean, what I proposed was that people send in what they are concerned with and that I send back the total list for everyone so that as a board we can at least have that to think about for the next meeting or something. So we don't wait until November 18th. But if you want to wait until then, we can do it that way.
Okay.
Just come prepared at that meeting.
I think come prepared, and I think what would be really helpful, the speaker who was here 2 weeks ago, Laura, had topics that she was interested in. It would be really helpful, I think, to hear what those are, and then for us to come forward with what we are thinking about as well, and to come together on an agreement about what the leadership of DAC together with the board, all of the board, wants to work on. So I think that's probably the best way to proceed.
And it would be good to have those topics reiterated because they they went by pretty fast.
Oh, they went, they were fast, and I didn't see them in writing, and that it would be really useful to see what she said. Okay, Sam, anything? No? Okay, Tina, Shelley? Okay. Well, then, our next, I guess that's it. So our meeting is adjourned. Thank you all for...
Until after the bond election.
That's right.
Sorry.
At our next meeting, I'm hoping that we'll be celebrating.
We will be. I'm confident.
Right. Okay. Well, yeah. We'll meet after the next meeting. Right. Next meeting after the bond. Okay. Thank you very much. This meeting's adjourned.